Howdy, y'all, and good morning. And today I'm going to be talking about how to make the most out of Ableton Live Lite. Today we'll be specifically talking about how to get more instruments into your projects. We are limited in Ableton Live Lite to 8 channels total. That is audio or MIDI, as well as 2 return channels, or buses, as some people call them. So that really limits us to how many things we can kind of put into a track. You know, a lot of instrumental music, or non-instrument, any music nowadays usually involves like just channels upon channels upon channels upon channels. So something that I have found to work around this is instrument groups or instrument racks. So I have here in my project something I've pre-built ahead of time just to save some time during the video. But I also have here a blank MIDI channel. So you're going to need a new project with a blank MIDI channel, and you're going to need some instruments. So you can either use the pre-built instruments from Ableton, or you can go onto the internet and download some instruments. So I have a few. I've got Sonatina Orchestra that I've built with. Today I'm going to be using the free BBC Symphony Orchestra. There is a free version of this. And that's what I've got here. So no worries if you are thinking that you'll have to pay for something, you won't. Okay, so 2 ways to go about creating this instrument. 1, you can drag and drop it onto the MIDI channel, and then when it appears, you right click on that instrument in the channel, and you're going to hit Group or Control G or Command G for my Mac people out there. Other way, and the way that is sometimes a little bit better, is you are going to drag an instrument rack onto that MIDI channel. Same thing pops up as before, except it doesn't have the instrument in there. So I go back into my plugin, and I'm going to drop that into my instrument rack. And it is good to note that you can mix and match. So let's say I want to have some BBC Symphony Orchestra patches for some of my instruments, but I also want some Sonatina Orchestra patches for some of my instruments. You can mix and match. Okay, so once you get them into the instrument rack or the instrument group, you want to make sure that you are naming them as you go along. So today we're going to make a string group. So I'm going to call this one Violin 1. And I'm going to go in, if I click on this, or if I double click on the instrument itself, it will turn that on and off. Click on the wrench, and I'm going to sort it to strings, double click on Violin 1, and boom. If I turn this guy off, I have Violin 1 sound. Beautiful. Same thing goes for this. Let's go ahead and switch them here. If I double click on, oh, it was already open. I'm a doofus. Solo violin, let's go violin, like a section. Cool. So I've got my violin sound. Now I happen not to like that one very much, so I'm going to delete it. Okay, so pro tip number 1 when you're doing this is to name everything. So let's go ahead and go to our channel here, and let's call this BBC Strings, which you can see, Strings 2.0. You can see that I've got my pre-built one over there. I'm going to go into my instrument rack, and I'm going to rename that one as well. And that'll be especially important when I save it. BBC Strings. Okay. So rename everything, the chains, the individual chains, the instrument itself, and even the channel so that you don't get lost. Now, if I select the chain, I can duplicate it, which will help save some time since I'm not changing a lot of settings. It's usually faster when you're not changing many settings just to duplicate things. And I know that I have Violin 1, Violin 2, violas, celli, and basses. So that's a total of 5 chains that I need. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate my way to 5. My computer is being especially slow this morning. Sorry for that. Duplicate. And so you'll see now I have 5 chains. Pretty easy. I'll rename them with their appropriate name. Oops, that should say Violin 2. And then I'll go in and I'll select the appropriate sound. It does not have to be an orchestral instrument. I could use an electronic instrument. I could use a homemade instrument if I wanted to. So once I go through and do all of that, you end up with something like this. Ignore the reds. You see I have violin 1, violin 2, viola, cello, and contrabass. So let's go ahead and let's mute these guys real quick and just show you. Oops, I can't do that all at once, I guess. So something cool about the BBC Symphony Orchestra is that they already have ranged instruments, meaning that they won't play notes that are not possible for that instrument. So the viola won't, or the violin won't be playing down here, and the bass will be playing up here. That's pretty cool and very handy. Some instruments, though, don't have that feature. So what you'll have to do is you'll go into this key thing. And you see I've already messed around with this just a little bit. What I've done is I've dragged the ranges around. So I've specified my violin 2 is only going to play for these notes. My violin 1 is only going to play for these notes. And the way you do that, you hover over the edge of the bar and you just click and drag until you're satisfied. This top bar here is a fader. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to organically kind of adjust the note as it approaches its extreme ranges. So like a lot of instruments will become crass or brassy or harsh as they go super high or super low in their range. So one way to counteract that is to kind of organically fade it on each end of the range. You can also use it to create some cool crossfade effects, especially if you're doing electronic instruments. This can be a sweet way of morphing one sound into another. Anyway, that's not what this video is about. This video is about using this to maximize how many instruments you can get onto one channel. So I'm going to get rid of my scrap channel here. You see I have one channel. And on that one channel, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instruments, which I then doubled. And now I have 10. You can see it's the same 5 instruments. And I'm just going to go ahead. Let's reset the range on these violin 1s and violins 2 here. That way I can play them the whole way. Bloop, bloop, bloop. And bloop and bloop. Cool. So now they're playing the entire range when it's possible for them. Okay. What was I saying? Oh, yes. So why did I duplicate these? Why do I have these red guys here? The reason is if I go into my velocity selector, and I'm just going to select these red guys, and I'm going to move their velocity up to a higher number. What I've done for these red instruments, I have gone into, let's go ahead and hide this just to keep it out of our way. Let's turn these back on. I've gone into the actual interface for the instrument and I've selected a different patch or different sample. So these are all the staccato ones. I could have chosen pizzicato, or if there was a marcato one for brass or something like that, there's going to be different settings you can select. And what that does is it allows me for soft sounds, I use only the legato string. For more aggressive stuff, I use both. So you can hear that I get a little bit more punch at the start of the chords, which is especially helpful if you're writing, say, trailer music and you want a big brass punch at the start of your brass chords, but you don't want it to be that punchy the entire time. You just add a staccato brass at the start of your sound, and then you back it off from there. Let's see, so talked about downloading the instruments, adding the instrument rack and or grouping, creating as many instances as you need. So now I have 10 instruments on that one channel, which is extremely helpful. duplicating them, or you can drag and drop them straight from the menu. Naming them, you can mix and match from different instruments or different plugins. We talked about key and velocity selection. Chain selection is its own little thing. It might be worth just YouTube searching chain select in Ableton. That takes a few minutes to talk about on its own, and that's not the purpose of this video. Something that we lose a little bit of, or composers feel they have less control of, is the nitty-gritty details. So balance, panning, individual dynamics when it comes to grouping instruments this way. And there are ways to work around that as well. So I have 10 instruments here. I can, if I right click on a parameter that can be mapped, I can map them to my macro knobs here. So I'm gonna name this violin, or let's just call this violin vol. So this is my gain for my violins. I could have violin 1 and violin 2s mapped to the same knob, and I'm just right clicking on the parameter and then clicking on the destination I want it mapped to. So you see, now I have this individual dynamic control. So if I have a clip here and I want to control, let's go to envelopes. You see I have the option to map my violin 1 volume. I can add dynamics to just my violin 1s. So it's a really cool way then to specifically control that. You can also specifically control panning, which is helpful. So like I have them spaced the way a real orchestra would be. Violin 1's on the left, violin 2's less left, all the way over to contrabasses on the right. You can also, as you need to, you can automate the on-offs or solos to select, who's playing at what time. So like, let's say you only want the cello playing at a certain time, you just mute everybody else, or you solo the cello. So there's a couple of ways you can work around things like that. Anyway, I hope this video has been helpful to you. It is my goal to help people make the most out of having the Lite version of Ableton Live, because Ableton is expensive. Yeah, let's just be real. But it's a good tool. So if you'd like to see more of a specific kind of content, please let me know. And until next time, stay out of trouble. How do I stop this video anyway?